There is a conversation happening inside you every single day. You may not hear it out loud, but it is shaping your life more than any external voice ever could. The greatest influence in your life is not your environment, not your past, not even the people around you. It is the voice you listen to the most, and that voice is your own. If you change that voice for just 3 days, you will begin to witness a shift that feels almost supernatural. Not because something magical has happened outside of you, but because you have finally taken control of what has always been within you. Your life is constantly being shaped by the words you repeat to yourself, whether you realize it or not. Every thought you entertain, every sentence you whisper internally, and every belief you reinforce through your own voice is building the framework of your reality. You're not just describing your life with your words, you are actively creating it. This is why two people can face the same situation, yet walk away with completely different outcomes. One speaks defeat and sees obstacles. The other speaks possibility and finds a way through. The human mind does not simply respond to circumstances. It responds to interpretation. And interpretation is largely formed by language. If you consistently tell yourself that you are tired, overwhelmed, or incapable, your mind begins to organize your behavior around those statements. Your energy drops, your focus weakens, and your actions begin to match the story you are telling. But if you shift your language, even before your situation changes, you begin to send a new instruction to your mind. You tell it to look for strength, to find solutions, to rise instead of retreat. Understand this clearly. Your mind is always listening. It does not filter your words for truth or falsehood. It accepts them as commands. When you say, "I can't handle this," your mind does not argue. It complies. It starts searching for evidence to support that statement. It reminds you of past failures, highlights your weaknesses, and magnifies your fears. But when you say, "I will figure this out," something different happens. Your mind shifts into problem-solving mode. It begins to explore options, recall past successes, and generate ideas that align with your declaration. This is why your words carry creative power. They are not empty sounds, they are instructions. They direct your focus, shape your emotions, and influence your decisions. Over time, those decisions accumulate and become your life. Many people are trying to change their results without changing their language, and that is why they remain stuck. You cannot consistently speak limitation and expect to experience expansion. For the next 3 days, if you become aware of your inner dialogue, you will likely discover how often you speak against yourself. You may notice subtle phrases like, "I'm not ready," "this is too much," or "I always mess things up." These may seem harmless, but repeated over time, they become beliefs. And beliefs are powerful because they operate beneath your awareness, quietly directing your behavior. The shift begins when you take responsibility for that voice. Instead of allowing it to run on autopilot, you begin to guide it with intention. You replace passive negative language with deliberate empowering statements. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing how you respond to it. You may still face challenges, but you refuse to describe them in a way that weakens you. When you wake up and speak strength over yourself, you are setting the tone for your entire day. When you encounter difficulty and respond with confidence instead of doubt, you are training your mind to operate differently. And when you consistently reinforce positive, purposeful language, you begin to build a new internal environment, one that supports growth rather than resistance. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about understanding that your words determine your direction. If you want to move forward, your language must align with that intention. You cannot speak fear and expect courage to rise. You cannot speak confusion and expect clarity to appear. What you consistently say to yourself becomes the lens through which you see everything. So for 3 days, treat your words as tools, not reactions. Use them to build, to guide, and to strengthen. Speak in a way that reflects where you are going, not just where you are. Because once your words change, your thinking follows. And once your thinking changes, your actions begin to align. That is how transformation begins. Not from the outside, but from the voice within you that decides what your life will become. Every thought you repeat becomes a pattern, and every pattern eventually becomes a belief. What most people fail to realize is that your mind is always listening, always recording, and always responding to the words you feed it. It does not argue with you. It does not filter truth from lies. It simply accepts repetition as instruction. This is why the way you speak to yourself is not casual. It is programming. From a psychological perspective, your brain is wired to reinforce what it hears most often. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. When you consistently tell yourself, "I'm not capable," your brain begins to organize your behavior around that statement. It looks for evidence to confirm it. It reminds you of past failures. It lowers your willingness to try. Not because you are incapable, but because your internal system has been trained to believe that you are. On the other hand, when you begin to speak constructive, empowering words, you are not pretending, you are redirecting. You are interrupting an old pattern and installing a new one. The brain, through a process often referred to as neuroplasticity, has the ability to rewire itself based on repeated input. This means your self-talk is not just emotional, it is structural. It is shaping the very way your brain functions. Consider how automatic your reactions are. When something goes wrong, what is the first thing you say to yourself? For many, it is criticism. I messed up again. I always do this. These statements may feel harmless, but they are instructions. Over time, they create a mental environment where mistakes are not seen as opportunities to learn, but as confirmation of inadequacy. This leads to hesitation, fear, and avoidance. But when you consciously change that response, everything begins to shift. Instead of saying, "I failed," you say, "I am learning." Instead of, "I can't handle this," you say, "I am developing the strength to manage this." These are not empty affirmations. They are cognitive reframes that guide your brain toward growth rather than limitation. Your subconscious mind, which governs most of your habits and automatic behaviors, does not respond to logic. It responds to repetition and emotion. This is why simply knowing something is not enough to change it. You may know you have potential, but if your daily self-talk contradicts that, your subconscious will follow the stronger signal, which is repetition. That is why consistency is critical. One positive statement will not override years of negative conditioning, but repeated intentional self-talk begins to create a new baseline. At first, it may feel unnatural, even uncomfortable. That is because you are challenging an established pattern. But discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of change. There is also a physiological response to your self-talk. The words you use can influence your stress levels, your focus, and even your energy. Negative self-talk can trigger stress responses, releasing cortisol and putting your body in a defensive state. Positive, directive self-talk can promote clarity, reduce anxiety, and increase your sense of control. This is not abstract, it is measurable. You must begin to treat your inner dialogue with the same level of responsibility as your external communication. You would not allow someone else to constantly speak negativity over your life without resistance. Yet many people allow their own minds to do exactly that without question. This lack of awareness is what keeps them stuck. Awareness is the first step. You must start listening to how you speak to yourself throughout the day. Not occasionally, but consistently. Notice the tone, the language, the assumptions. Then take responsibility for changing it. Do not wait for your thoughts to improve on their own. Direct them. When you intentionally guide your self-talk, you are not ignoring reality. You are shaping your response to it. And your response determines your actions. Your actions determine your results. This is how something as simple as words can influence the entire direction of your life. Over time, as your internal dialogue becomes more aligned with growth, resilience, and purpose, you will notice a shift in how you think, how you act, and how you respond to challenges. Opportunities that once felt intimidating will begin to feel manageable. Obstacles will no longer stop you, they will instruct you. This is the power of self-talk. It is not just conversation, it is programming. And once you understand that, you stop speaking carelessly. You become intentional because you realize that every word you say to yourself is either building you or limiting you. And the choice every single time is yours. There is a voice inside you that has been speaking for years, and most of the time you've allowed it to run without question. It comments on your ability, judges your past, predicts your future, and often does so with a tone that weakens your confidence. What you must understand is this: not every voice within you deserves your agreement. Just because a thought appears does not mean it is true, and just because it is familiar does not mean it is right. Many people live under the control of an inner narrative that was never consciously chosen. It was built over time through experiences, failures, criticism, rejection, and comparison. And without realizing it, they begin to repeat these internal statements until they become beliefs. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. Nothing ever works for me. These are not facts. They are conclusions formed without proper authority. Yet, because they are repeated, they begin to feel real. You must develop the discipline to interrupt that pattern. The moment a negative thought arises, you cannot entertain it, negotiate with it, or allow it to settle. You must confront it immediately. Silence is not passive, it is intentional. It is the act of refusing to give energy to what does not serve your growth. When a thought contradicts your purpose, your potential, or your progress, it must be denied access. Understand this clearly. Your mind responds to authority. If you allow every thought to speak, your mind becomes chaotic. But when you establish rules, when you decide what is allowed and what is rejected, you begin to create order. You are not at the mercy of your thoughts. Your thoughts are subject to your direction. This requires awareness. Most people lose because they are not paying attention. Thoughts pass through their mind unchecked, and before they realize it, their mood has shifted, their energy has dropped, and their confidence has weakened. But when you become aware, you catch the thought at the door. You examine it. You ask, does this align with who I am becoming? If the answer is no, it does not stay. Replacing negative thoughts is not about pretending problems don't exist. It is about choosing a response that empowers rather than limits. If your mind says you're going to fail, you respond with, I am learning, I am improving, and I am capable of figuring this out. This is not fantasy. It is alignment with growth. It shifts your focus from limitation to possibility. You must also recognize that repetition builds strength. The negative voice became strong because it was repeated over time. In the same way, your new voice, the one that speaks truth, strength, and clarity, must also be repeated. At first, it may feel unnatural. It may feel forced, but consistency will make it familiar, and familiarity will make it powerful. Guarding your inner dialogue is one of the highest forms of self-discipline. It determines how you interpret challenges, how you respond to setbacks, and how you see yourself in moments of pressure. Two people can face the same situation, but their internal conversation will produce completely different outcomes. One collapses under doubt, while the other rises with determination. The difference is not the situation, it is the voice they chose to listen to. There is no neutral ground in your mind. Every thought is either building you or breaking you. Every internal statement is either moving you forward or holding you back. When you allow negative voices to speak freely, you are unintentionally giving permission for limitation to grow. But when you silence them and replace them with deliberate, constructive truth, you begin to take control of your direction. For these 3 days, you must become strict with your inner dialogue. Not harsh, but disciplined. You do not allow negativity to linger. You do not rehearse failure in your mind. You do not repeat words that weaken your identity. Instead, you become selective, intentional, focused. And as you do this, something begins to shift. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become more stable. Your actions become more confident. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed the way you process it. This is where real power begins, not in controlling everything around you, but in mastering what happens within you. Most people speak to themselves based on how they feel, and that is where they surrender their power without realizing it. Feelings are real, but they are not reliable leaders. They shift with circumstances, with memories, with opinions, and even with the smallest inconvenience. If you allow your inner voice to be guided by emotion alone, then your identity will become unstable. One day you will feel strong and capable, and the next day you will question everything about yourself. That inconsistency is not a reflection of who you truly are. It is the result of letting temporary emotions define permanent identity. You must understand that identity is not something you discover in your feelings. It is something you declare with intention. Feelings report conditions, but identity establishes direction. When you wake up and you feel unmotivated, that feeling is simply reporting your current state. It is not giving you permission to become less than who you are meant to be. The mistake many people make is they interpret a feeling as a command. They feel tired, so they tell themselves they are weak. They feel uncertain, so they conclude they are incapable. In doing so, they reinforce limitations that were never meant to define them. When you begin to speak from identity instead of emotion, you interrupt that cycle. You are no longer reacting, you are leading. You are no longer agreeing with what is temporary, you are establishing what is permanent. This requires discipline because your mind will naturally try to pull you back into emotional language. It will say things like, I don't feel like doing this, or I'm not in the right mood, or maybe I'm just not good at this. In that moment, you must respond with authority, not agreement. You must say, I am committed regardless of how I feel. I am capable regardless of what this moment looks like. I am consistent even when it is uncomfortable. This is not about ignoring your emotions. It is about refusing to let them take control. Emotions are indicators, not dictators. They can inform you, but they should not define you. When you speak identity into your life, you are choosing to align yourself with purpose rather than pressure. You are reminding yourself that who you are is greater than what you feel in a passing moment. There is a powerful shift that happens when you start using language that reflects identity. Instead of saying, I hope I can do this, you begin to say, I am learning how to do this. Instead of saying, I always struggle, you say, I am becoming stronger through this process. Notice the difference. One language traps you in limitation, while the other positions you in growth. The words you choose are not small details. They are the framework of your mindset. Over time, your brain begins to accept what you consistently declare. If you repeatedly speak identity with clarity and conviction, your actions will start to follow. You will find yourself showing up differently, not because you suddenly feel better, but because you have decided who you are regardless of how you feel. That decision is where real transformation begins. Many people are waiting for confidence to appear before they speak boldly to themselves. But confidence is built through repetition, not waiting. The more you affirm your identity, the more natural it becomes. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because it contradicts the patterns you have been used to. But discomfort is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that you are growing beyond your old conditioning. You must also be careful not to attach your identity to your mistakes. When something goes wrong, do not say, I am a failure. So, you said, anyam chitranj yo. That is emotional language trying to redefine you. Instead, say, I made a mistake, but I'm still learning and improving. This keeps your identity intact while allowing room for growth. Identity should be stable, even when your performance is not. Speaking from identity is an act of self-leadership. It is choosing to take responsibility for the narrative inside your mind. No one else can do this for you. People may encourage you, situations may inspire you, but at the end of the day, the voice that will shape your life the most is the one you choose to believe within yourself. When you commit to this for even a few days, you will begin to notice a difference. You will catch yourself before speaking negatively. You will replace doubt with direction. And slowly you will realize that you are no longer at the mercy of your emotions. You are operating from a place of clarity and purpose. That is the power of speaking identity over emotion. It stabilizes your mindset, strengthens your actions, and positions you to live intentionally rather than reactively. And once you experience that shift, you will understand that your words were never just expressions. They were instructions shaping the person you are becoming. Consistency is the force that turns intention into transformation. Anyone can speak one powerful sentence once and feel a temporary surge of motivation, but real change does not respond to intensity. It responds to repetition. Your mind is not convinced by what you say occasionally. It is shaped by what you say consistently. That is why 3 days matter. Not because 3 days is a long time, but because it is long enough to interrupt an old pattern and introduce a new direction. You must understand how the mind works. It is designed to automate whatever you repeat. Every thought, every word, every reaction you practice becomes easier the next time. This is how habits are formed, not through effort alone, but through consistency. When you have been speaking doubt, fear, and limitation over yourself for months or even years, those patterns have become automatic. They require no effort anymore. They feel natural, even though they are destructive. Now, when you begin to speak differently, when you start declaring strength, discipline, clarity, it will feel unnatural at first. It may even feel uncomfortable or forced. But that discomfort is not a sign that it is wrong. It is a sign that something new is being introduced. Most people quit at this stage because they mistake unfamiliarity for ineffectiveness. They say, this doesn't feel like me. But growth is never supposed to feel like the old version of you. Consistency demands that you continue even when it does not feel powerful, even when your emotions resist it, even when your environment does not reflect it yet. Because you are not speaking based on evidence. You are speaking to create evidence. You are not describing your current state. You are defining your future state. For 3 days, your responsibility is simple but not easy. Do not break the pattern. Speak intentionally in the morning. Reinforce it during the day. Repeat it at night. Catch yourself when your mind tries to return to old language. Replace it immediately. Do not negotiate with negative thoughts. Do not entertain them. Interrupt them. The power of this process is not just in what you say, but in how often you say it. Repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds belief. What was once uncomfortable begins to feel normal. What once felt like a lie begins to feel like truth. And once your mind accepts something as truth, it begins to act accordingly. You will notice small shifts first. Your posture changes. Your decisions become slightly more confident. You hesitate less. You begin to act in alignment with the words you are repeating. This is how internal language begins to shape external behavior. It is subtle at first, but it is undeniable. And here is the key. Consistency removes dependence on motivation. You are no longer waiting to feel inspired. You are operating from discipline. You speak the right words not because you feel like it, but because you have decided that this is who you are becoming. That decision, repeated over and over again, begins to override your old identity. 3 days of consistency can break the illusion that you are stuck. It proves that change is not something outside your control. It shows you that your mind can be trained, directed, and corrected. And once you experience that shift, something deeper happens. You gain confidence, not just in your words, but in your ability to lead yourself. From there, you extend it. 3 days become a habit. A habit becomes a lifestyle. And a lifestyle becomes your new reality. But it all begins with consistency, the willingness to repeat the right words long enough for them to take root. Because the truth is, your life is already a result of consistency. The only question is, what have you been consistent with? If you change that, even for a short period of time, you begin to change everything. Authority over your inner dialogue is the turning point where your life stops being a reaction and starts becoming a deliberate creation. Most people think they are in control of their lives, but if you listen carefully, their words betray them. They say things like, I can't handle this. This always happens to me, or I'll never get it right. What they don't realize is that these are not harmless statements. They are commands. And the mind, by design, obeys the dominant voice it hears most consistently. You must understand this clearly. Your mind does not argue with you. It does not filter your words based on truth or falsehood. It simply executes what you repeatedly declare. This is why 2 people can face the same situation and produce completely different outcomes. One speaks limitation and becomes limited. The other speaks possibility and begins to see solutions. The difference is not in the situation. It is in the authority exercised within. Authority means you no longer allow every thought to take the microphone in your life. You become selective. You become disciplined. You begin to recognize that not every thought deserves expression and not every feeling deserves agreement. There are thoughts that come to weaken you, to distract you, to keep you in cycles that lead nowhere. If you give them a voice, they gain power. But if you confront them with intentional words, they lose their influence. This is where most people struggle. They think authority is about controlling external circumstances, but true authority begins internally. It is the ability to interrupt a negative pattern and replace it with a constructive one in real time. When your mind says you're not ready, authority responds, I am preparing and I am moving forward anyway. When fear whispers, what if you fail? Authority answers, what if I succeed? This is not about pretending problems do not exist. It is about refusing to let them define your response. Over the course of 3 days, this practice begins to recondition your mental environment. At first, it will feel unnatural. You may even feel like you are forcing it. That is because you are breaking familiarity. Your mind has been trained, often for years, to default to certain patterns. But repetition creates new pathways. Every time you override a negative statement with a purposeful one, you are strengthening a new direction. You are teaching your mind a new standard. Authority also requires consistency. It is not enough to speak positively once and then return to old habits. The mind responds to what is repeated, not what is occasional. This is why those 3 days matter. They are not about perfection, they are about persistence. You are establishing a new rhythm, a new expectation for how you communicate with yourself. And as this authority grows, something remarkable begins to happen. Your decisions become clearer. Your actions become more aligned. You stop hesitating in moments where you used to doubt yourself. Not because the external world has changed, but because the internal conversation has shifted. You are no longer negotiating with fear. You are directing your life with intention. Eventually, you reach a point where your inner dialogue becomes a source of strength rather than conflict. You wake up with direction instead of confusion. You face challenges with composure instead of panic. And you begin to understand that the power you were searching for outside has always been rooted in your ability to govern what happens within. This is what it means to have authority. It is not loud and it is not visible to others at first, but it is undeniable in its results. It is the quiet decision, repeated daily, to speak in alignment with who you are becoming rather than who you used to be. And once you truly take ownership of that voice, you will never again underestimate the impact of a single word spoken to yourself.